Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. She didn't look back as the plane door hissed shut behind her. Nina clenched her fists in her lap, the airplane seatbelt pressing into her waist as the final passengers scrambled past her to find their places. Her heart was pounding so hard. It hurt, like it was trying to run even faster than she had. She hadn't told anyone where she was going, not even her sister, not the police, not her lawyer. Just one small bag, a burner phone, and a credit card she'd secretly opened under her maiden name 6 months ago. After what her husband did, staying wasn't survival anymore. It was suicide. The plane trembled as it prepared to taxi. She stared out the window. Her breath fogged the plastic as she whispered, "It's over. It has to be." But then, "Nina," she froze. Her eyes widened. Slowly, terrified, she turned toward the voice beside her. A man was sitting there, well-dressed, early 40s, eyes so sharp they looked like they could cut straight through her. She had never seen him before. "Nina Fields." He didn't ask. He said it like he knew. Her mouth went dry. I think you have the wrong person." He smiled slightly. "No, I don't." Her seatbelt suddenly felt like a noose. "Who are you?" she whispered, but the man didn't answer. He turned toward the window as the plane began its ascent, and Nina couldn't breathe. 12 hours earlier. Nina had sat in the back seat of the Uber, fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope. Inside were copies of emails, medical reports, and one crumpled photograph. Her husband, Daniel, had been the town's golden boy, respected surgeon, charming, generous, until last year, when he started locking his phone, staying out late. Gaslighting her into thinking she was losing her mind. She didn't even find out about the affair until after the miscarriage. The worst part, the woman he'd been seeing, it was someone she knew, her best friend, Kira. But that wasn't what broke her. It was the hospital bill, one she wasn't supposed to see, one that listed Kira as the emergency contact on a procedure that matched the date of her own miscarriage. Nina wasn't crazy. She had been poisoned, and Daniel had gotten away with it, until today, back on the plane, 30 minutes in the air, and the stranger still hadn't spoken again. Nina's mind raced. How did he know her name? She was flying under Claire Martin. The ID was fake. The ticket was bought in cash. She glanced at him. He was reading a book, something old, hardcover. The title rubbed off. She took a shaky breath. "Listen, I don't know who you think I am, but I'm just trying to get away from something. I'm not in trouble." The man closed the book slowly and looked at her. "Everyone who runs thinks they're not in trouble." Her spine went cold. She narrowed. Her eyes. "Are you a cop?" "No." "Then what do you want from me?" He reached into his coat pocket and slid something toward her. It was a photograph. She felt her stomach drop. In the photo, Daniel, Kira, and another man, older with graying temples and a deep scar across his jaw. "I've been watching them for a long time," the stranger said calmly. "But until now, I didn't know what they'd done to you." Nina stared at the photo. Her throat tightened. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man leaned closer. "Let's just say I lost someone because of them. And I think you're the key to making them pay. 2 years ago. The man in the photo, scarred, angry-eyed, was named Dr. Ivan Hall. He'd been Daniel's mentor once. And just like Nina, he had been betrayed. But no one believed Ivan. His license was revoked after a malpractice claim, one he swore Daniel fabricated to cover up a larger conspiracy. Drug trials, illegal patient testing, and vanishing records. Ivan tried to go public. Weeks later, he was accidentally hit by a car. He disappeared. Everyone thought he died. But he didn't. Back on the plane, "I know about the poisoning," the stranger said softly. "Your hair samples still show signs of warfare in." Nina's lips parted. How do you know that?" "I have people." She turned away, overwhelmed. This was too much. She had escaped to disappear, not to dig deeper, but then the stranger added, "There's a recording of Daniel from a patient he didn't know was wired. You'll want to hear it." Nina's head whipped back. "What kind of recording?" The man leaned in. "The kind that proves you're not crazy." 45 minutes later, the plane began to hit turbulence. People murmured. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, and then suddenly darkness. The cabin lights flickered and went out. Oxygen masks dropped. Panic erupted. Nina gasped, clutching the armrest. But the stranger, he was calm. Too calm. In the chaos, he grabbed her hand. "We're not crashing," he said. "But they know you're here." Her eyes widened. "What? Who knows?" He looked around and pulled her close. "Daniel isn't just a surgeon, Nina. He's part of something bigger, and he's been tracking your phone." She stared in horror. "My phone's off." "It doesn't matter. The battery pings satellites. Even when powered down." Suddenly a man in a grey hoodie stood from row 12 and began walking toward them, eyes locked on her. The stranger grabbed her wrist. "Don't scream. Just follow my lead." The plane landed for an emergency stop in Reykjavik, Iceland. They were told it was due to a malfunction in the pressure cabin. But as they deboarded, Nina noticed something chilling. The man in the hoodie didn't come off the plane. He never intended to. In the cold, sterile light of the airport, Nina turned to the stranger. "I need answers. All of them. Now." He looked at her. "I'll tell you everything. But first, we have to disappear again." "Why?" "Because Daniel's not the only one after you." The wind cut through Nina's coat like knives as she and the stranger stepped into the frozen air of Reykjavik's airport tarmac. She didn't know if she was shaking from the cold or from the truth she'd just heard. The stranger had spoken with the precision of a man who knew too much, and yet somehow she believed every word. "We can't stay here," he said, gripping her elbow with urgency. "They'll trace the reroute in less than an hour. We need to move." He guided her through a side corridor typically reserved for private security clearances. No one stopped them. Nina couldn't tell if that comforted or terrified, or more. This man, who hadn't even told her his name, seemed to command spaces as if he owned them. "Tell me your name," she said breathlessly as they stepped into a service stairwell, descending rapidly. "Elias," he replied. "Elias Cole." "How do I know I can trust you?" He stopped suddenly, pinning her with a gaze so intense she almost forgot. The icy air pressing into her lungs. "You don't," he said. "But you left your husband for a reason he was willing to bury you for. And I have the proof you need to bring him down. You want justice, Nina, or do you want to keep running?" She swallowed hard. Her silence was her answer. Elias had arranged a car, one waiting in a remote part of the airport grounds. A local woman named Agnetha was at the wheel, and she didn't say a word as they climbed in. Nina took the back seat, heart racing. Snow drifted sideways in thick curtains as they drove away from the terminal. For a long time, no one spoke. Nina watched the bleak landscape pass by. The land was white, harsh, and otherworldly. It felt like a dream she might wake from any moment. "This isn't just about the affair," Elias finally said. "It was never just about that." "I know," she said, her voice low. "I found the insurance papers. He took out a policy on me, months before the miscarriage, and there were forged signatures. I figured. The poisoning wasn't to hurt you. It was to finish you. He knew how much to give, not enough to raise questions, just enough to push your body past the point of keeping a child." Her hands curled into fists in her lap. The pain of that loss was still raw. "He sat beside me in the hospital," she said bitterly, "held my hand, said we'd try again." Elias turned to look at her. "He's done this before." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "You're not the first," Elias said quietly. "That's why I'm here." One of his former patients reached out to a journalist friend of mine, said she thought her sister had been killed, that she died under Daniel's care. The hospital called it a routine procedure gone wrong. But then the files disappeared. Death certificate vanished from public records. The journalist tried to investigate. A week later, she crashed her car. Brake lines cut. Nina covered her mouth, horrified. "Daniel's not working alone," Elias said. "He's part of a private medical ring, testing experimental treatments on unknowing patients. The rich fund it, the poor disappear, and the ones who get close to the truth die." They arrived at a secluded cabin nestled deep in the Icelandic hills. It was modern but modest, and Nina felt its warmth even before she stepped inside. Elias led her to a small desk near the fireplace. On it sat a metal briefcase. "This is everything I've got," he said, unlocking it. "Documents, hard drives, audio files, names of investors, surgeons, records of patient deaths listed under false in causes." He handed her a flash drive. "This one's yours," he said. "Contains the audio I told you about, Daniel's voice. He was drunk, talking to one of his friends at a medical conference. Didn't know the guy was wired by federal investigators. You'll want to hear this." With trembling fingers, Nina inserted the drive into the laptop Elias provided. The voice that filled the room made her knees buckle. "She thinks I care, but honestly it was just easier that way. Once the kid was out of the picture, she was going to leave. But now, she's weak, easy to control, and if she goes off the rails, the policy pays out either way." Nina sat down hard. She had suspected, feared, but hearing it with her own ears, that was different. That was undeniable. Elias closed the laptop gently. "We leak this. He's done. But it'll cost you. Your identity, your anonymity, your peace. He'll come after you with everything he's got." Nina met his eyes. "He already did. I'm still here." That night, Elias made dinner. It was the first hot meal Nina had eaten in over 24 hours. They sat at the kitchen table as the snowstorm howled outside. For a brief moment it almost felt normal. "Why are you doing this?" she asked him. "Really?" Elias hesitated. "Because 2 years ago my sister went in for a minor procedure," he said. "Same hospital, same wing. Daniel was on call. She never woke up. The autopsy said undetermined causes." And then the file disappeared. Nina felt her throat tighten. She reached out and gently touched his hand. "We'll bring them down. All of them." But just as she said it, a sharp knock echoed at the cabin door. They froze. Agnetha stood, peered through a slit in the curtain. "It's police," she whispered. "Asking for Nina Fields." Nina's blood turned to ice. "How did they find us?" Elias grabbed the laptop, yanked the drive out, and stuffed it in a fireproof pouch. "We have a back exit," he said. "Go now." But just as they turned, the door burst open. 3 officers entered. The lead one stepped forward. "Miss Fields," he said sternly, "you're under arrest." "For what?" Elias demanded. "Suspicion of attempted murder," the officer replied. "Her husband is in critical condition, poisoned." Nina's world tilted. "No," she whispered. I didn't do anything." But they were already reaching for the cuffs. Handcuffs bit into her wrists like ice. Nina stared blankly at the snow-covered road as the police car pulled away from the cabin, its tires crunching on the frozen gravel. Everything had happened. So fast. Elias yelling, Agnetha shouting in Icelandic, the cold steel snapping over her wrists, and now she was being taken away. The officer sitting next to her said nothing, but he kept glancing at her, like she was a puzzle missing pieces. "I didn't poison him," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. The silence that followed was heavier than the cold. At the Reykjavik Metropolitan Detention Center, Nina was processed like any other suspect, photographed, fingerprinted, her belongings taken. When they handed her a paper-thin blanket and led her into a small, windowless holding room, reality crashed into her chest like a freight train. She sat on the edge of the steel bench, trembling. How had everything flipped so violently? Just hours ago she had evidence in hand, a plan, a chance at justice, and now she was alone. The metal door scraped open. A woman entered, early 50s, sharp eyes, professional clothes that screamed, "Government." "I'm Inspector Freya Halldórsdóttir," she said, placing a file on the table. "You're Nina Fields, yes?" Nina nodded slowly. "You're being held under suspicion of attempted murder," Freya continued. "Your husband, Dr. Daniel Fields, was found unconscious in his home in Boston 3 days ago. Toxicology confirmed poisoning. Same agent found in your personal belongings when you were arrested." "What?" Nina blinked. "That's impossible. I haven't been near him in weeks, months." Freya raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Because your flight reroute showed suspicious behavior, and your laptop confiscated from the cabin contains research on lethal drug interactions." That laptop isn't even mine. It belongs to Elias." Freya paused. "Elias. Cole. Yes, he's the one who warned me. About Daniel. About the medical ring. He has proof." Freya's fingers tapped lightly against the file. "There's no record of an Elias Cole entering Iceland with you. We've contacted Interpol. They have no trace of him. No passport, no immigration stamp. Nothing." Nina's stomach sank. "That's not possible. He was just there. He's real." "Is he?" Freya asked, tilting her head. Nina looked down, heart pounding. Had she been set up? They left her in the cell overnight. The fluorescent light buzzed above her, flickering slightly, like even the ceiling was questioning her version of reality. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elias, his steady voice, the firelight glinting off his face, the audio recording. She knew what she heard. Daniel's voice, cold, calculated, unless that too had been fabricated. No. She shook her head violently. This wasn't her paranoia speaking. This was fear. Real, grounded fear. She just didn't know where the threat was coming from anymore. Morning came with a bang, literally. The cell door slammed open, and a guard motioned her out. "Your lawyer is here." "I didn't call anyone," he shrugged. "She insisted." In the visitor's room, a woman in a navy trench coat sat with a leather portfolio on her lap. She stood as Nina entered. "Ms. Fields, I'm Kara Isley. I work with international defense cases, and I've been retained on your behalf." "By who?" Kara smiled faintly. "A mutual friend." Nina's breath caught. "Elias." Kara didn't confirm, but she opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Read this." It was a court-issued motion, requesting Nina's release on conditional diplomatic grounds, pending evidence review, along with a formal extradition hold placed by the U.S. government. "Wait, why is the U.S. blocking my return?" "Because someone powerful doesn't want you back in Boston," Kara said. "Not until you've disappeared. That's why you're being held here, because they know Icelandic protocol is slower. But it gives us time." "Time for what?" "To prove what you and Elias were investigating. To take down the people who want you gone. But you have to trust me, and you have to disappear. Again." 2 hours later, Nina was in a different car, headed north with Kara at the wheel. "I know a place," Kara said, eyes fixed on the road. "Remote, quiet. We can work from there." Nina sat back, overwhelmed. "How do I know you're not part of this too?" she asked. "I trusted Elias. Now he's gone." Kara glanced at her. Elias didn't vanish. He was taken. Nina stared at her. "What?" "The same officers who arrested you. They weren't local. One was an undercover agent from a private security firm in Boston. They've been following Elias for months, trying to retrieve the evidence he stole. Where is he now? We're working on that." The safe house was a weather-beaten cottage on the edge of a frozen lake, sparse but fortified. Inside, Kara opened her laptop and connected to a secure server. "Elias uploaded a partial data cache before the raid," she explained. "It's not everything, but it's enough to start." She pulled up video files, patient records, transaction logs. "This," she pointed to a name, is Rachel Faulkner. Died under Dr. Field's care in 2021. Here's her real cause of death: blood clot due to unapproved serum injection. Unapproved? Trial drug. Not FDA cleared. Used without her consent. Daniel and his investors made $500,000 off. That one experiment. Nina's hands trembled. And here, Kara continued, is a phone transcript from Daniel's assistant about your pregnancy. The assistant mentions a modified dosage administered after your second appointment. Oh my God. Nina's voice cracked. He was dosing me while I carried our baby. Kara looked at her with sympathy. He never saw the baby. As a child, just a complication. Nina swallowed a scream. Rage throbbed behind her ribs. She had spent months grieving, thinking maybe it had been her fault, her body, her stress. But the truth was sicker than she ever imagined. That night, Nina walked to the edge of the frozen lake and looked out across the ice. She had two choices: disappear, start over somewhere no one would find her, or fight with everything she had. Left, her fists clenched. She couldn't let Rachel's death be in vain. Couldn't let Elias disappear into nothing. Couldn't let Daniel win. She turned and walked back inside. I want to go public, she told Kara, but I want control. I want the whole story out, on my terms. Kara nodded. We'll need a journalist, someone international, someone clean. I know someone, Nina said, remembering a name Elias had mentioned once. Clara Zheng, London-based, investigative. She's been hunting this ring for years. Kara raised a brow. You trust her? No, Nina said, but I trust the truth more. 2 days later, a secured video call connected Nina to Clara, who drank mid-30s, sharp voice, even sharper eyes. I've been chasing whispers about Daniel Fields for 3 years, Clara said. But you're the first living witness. I'm not just a witness, Nina replied. I'm the proof. She laid it all out. Elias, the cabin, the files, the audio. Clara listened, silently typing notes. When it was done, she said only one thing. We run this story in 3 days. Global platforms, full protection, but you'll need to vanish once it's live. They won't let you walk after this. I'm not afraid, Nina said, but that wasn't true. She was terrified. She just wasn't letting it win. On the third night, just as the snow began to fall again, Nina stood by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker. Kara came in, holding a phone. It's Elias, she said. They found him. Nina's heart surged. Where? Is he alive? Kara paused. He's in Boston, in a private medical facility. He's unconscious. Someone tried to kill him. They injected him with a paralytic agent. He can't speak. Nina's legs gave out. She sat, stunned. He's alive, but trapped. In his own body, Kara nodded. But he blinked, once for yes, twice for no. He confirmed the files are real, and he blinked once when I asked if he trusts you. Tears welled up in Nina's eyes. That was all she needed. The story broke the next morning. Headlines around the world. Renowned surgeon implicated in illegal medical ring. Wife escapes abuse and uncovers shocking truth about husband. Deadly trials. Vanishing patients. The hidden world of experimental medicine. The footage went viral. The audio. The documents. Names of the investors, all out, all exposed, but Nina didn't celebrate, because one day after the story aired, she received an anonymous text from a blocked number. You think it's over, but we're just getting started. Attached was a single, a photo. It was her, standing by the frozen lake from the night before, taken through a rifle scope. The silence in the interrogation room was suffocating. Nina stared at the mirrored wall across from her, heart thudding so loud it echoed in her ears. Her hands were still red from the cold, cuffed tightly in front of her. She hadn't spoken since they brought her in. A foreign officer paced the room slowly, his English accented but sharp. Let's start again, Miss Fields. Your husband, doctor. Daniel Fields was found unconscious in his home shortly after you left the country. Toxicology reports suggest a compound was administered in his scotch, something untraceable until recently banned for use in Europe. Your fingerprints were found on the bottle. I didn't poison him, Nina said hoarsely, yet you had motive. You fled. You were in possession of documents implicating him in illegal activities. I fled because I thought he was going to kill me. He stopped pacing and leaned on the table. Or you poisoned him first and fled before it got traced back to you. She stared at him. You think I'd fly to a remote part of Iceland to get caught? His face didn't shift. Criminals panic. They don't always run smart. Just then the door opened. A new man entered. American accent, tailored suit, a CIA lanyard, barely tucked under his coat. Nina Fields is not your jurisdiction anymore, he said to the Icelandic officer. She's coming with me. The officer scowled. She committed a crime on Icelandic soil. Correction, the man interrupted, flashing credentials. She's the key. Witness in an ongoing investigation into a black market medical ring spanning 6 countries. We've been working this case for 3 years. Your arrest just blew our timeline. Nina blinked. You knew? You knew what Daniel was doing? The agent turned to her, expression unreadable. We suspected, but we couldn't get to him. Not without you. An hour later, she was seated in a black SUV, watching the Icelandic countryside. Flashby again, only this time handcuff-free, sitting beside Elias. You okay? He asked softly. She gave a humorless laugh. Define okay. He didn't push her, just passed her a steaming coffee. The CIA agent, whose name was Ross, drove in silence. He finally spoke once they turned onto a narrow gravel road, heading toward an old farmhouse. Your husband's still alive, Ross said, unconscious, stable, but someone poisoned him, and if it wasn't you, then someone else on the inside is tying up loose ends. Elias finished grimly. Ross nodded. We believe someone tipped him off, about you, about what you were planning, and now someone else wants you silenced too. Nina tightened her grip on the coffee cup. It doesn't make sense. If Daniel's in a coma, who framed me? Ross pulled the car to a stop in front of the farmhouse. That's what we're here to find out. Inside, the place smelled of wood smoke and old paper. A makeshift intelligence hub had been set up. Laptops, files, a pinboard with red thread webbing between. Mugshots and documents. Nina's photo was pinned beside Daniel's, a red slash now marked through his. Don't worry, Ross said, seeing her eyes widen. Red means status unknown, not dead. Other names on the board had similar red lines. Most were marked deceased in chilling black marker. A few, one named Amira Berlin, another Dr. K. Pinder, were tagged missing. Who are these people, she asked. Victims, witnesses, collaborators, everyone who got close to the truth, Ross said. Elias stepped forward. You said someone tipped Daniel off. Do you know who? We're narrowing it down, Ross replied. But here's the twist. We believe someone in our agency might be compromised. This leak wasn't public. Only a few people knew Nina was preparing to testify. Nina swallowed hard. You think it's someone in the CIA? Or someone pretending to be? He pulled a folder from the desk and handed it to Elias. This is the intel from our Munich office. There's a name that came up in a transaction 2 days ago. Money transferred to a numbered account in the Caymans. Guess who it was traced back to? Elias opened the file. Nina stared. Agnetha? Ross nodded. Your driver. The woman who got you out of the airport. No, Nina whispered. She saved us. Elias scanned the document, face darkening. She was paid a small fortune 2 days before she picked us up, and the account has links to the same shell corporation Daniel used to launder research money. Nina stood, pacing. She knew where the cabin was. She called the police. She acted like she was protecting me. Double agents often do, Ross said. She stalled just long enough for Daniel's contact to plant the poison at his place. We think she also leaked our location. Nina felt sick. She Didn't even flinch when I told her about Daniel's confessions. She hugged me. Ross tapped the folder. You still have that flash drive? Elias nodded. Hidden. Safe house in Vic. Good. Because if this thing goes public now, before we're ready, we'll lose the whole operation. We need to turn this around. Nina folded her arms. What do you mean? We let them think you're guilty, Ross said. We let the media eat it up. A scorned wife, motive, opportunity, all of it. Then when they drop their guard, we drop the truth, Elias finished. The plan was dangerous. It required Nina to go underground, then resurface in a place where the media could catch her, in custody, but defiant. The CIA would stage it, with Ross pulling strings to control the narrative. It had to look real. Even Elias couldn't be seen with her after the setup began. That night, they sat on the farmhouse porch under a sky bruised by storm clouds. You sure you're ready for this? Elias asked. She nodded. I lost everything already. My marriage, my baby, my name. If I don't do this, it was all for nothing. He reached into his jacket and handed her a photograph. It was of a woman in her late 20s, bright-eyed, hair curled in loose coils. My sister. Her name was Lena. She always saw the good in people, even the ones who didn't deserve it. Nina held the photo with trembling fingers. I'll do this for her too. Elias hesitated. You may not hear from me for a while. Once this starts, I'm going silent. But if anything goes wrong, go to the lighthouse in Skarsvik. There's a man there named Victor. Tell him the owl sings. At midnight. He'll know what to do. She laughed despite herself. You spy types and your codes. But his face didn't change. I'm not a spy, just a brother who got tired of waiting for justice. The next morning, the plan began. A fake news. Leak emerged. American fugitive wanted for attempted murder spotted in Reykjavik. Surveillance images, doctored, showed Nina slipping into shadows, alone, dangerous. By evening she was captured at a hotel Ross had staged as a sting. Cameras snapped her face as two officers marched her into a transport van. Inside, Ross sat beside her, whispering instructions. Hold your breath for the next 48 hours. We're going to make you infamous. And then we'll burn them down. Back in Washington, the media frenzy exploded. News anchors debated her guilt. Tabloids printed lurid theories, scorned wife's revenge, million-dollar policy plot. But in the shadows of a surveillance bunker in Langley, the real show had just begun. Because someone had just accessed the Cayman's account, someone who thought Nina Fields was finished, and when they checked the access logs, one name lit up, Daniel Fields. The wind sliced through Nina's coat like shards of glass as she stepped onto the frozen tarmac at Reykjavik's airport. It wasn't just the cold that made her tremble. It was the man beside her, Elias Cole, and the truth he carried with him like a loaded weapon. She barely knew him, and yet the certainty in his voice had shattered whatever fragile wall of disbelief she'd tried to build. We can't stay here, Elias said, gripping her elbow with just enough force to make her listen, but not enough to alarm her. His breath fogged the air between them. They'll trace the reroute in less than an hour. We need to move. She nodded without meaning to, her legs following his lead as they crossed the tarmac toward a small security door. The regular airport crowd had thinned. This was a part of the terminal, not meant for civilians. The door clicked open at his swipe of a plastic card, and they were inside, a service hallway that smelled faintly of jet fuel and disinfectant. Where are we going? She asked, breathless from the cold and the sprint. Somewhere safe. For now, he replied. But first, you need to decide, do you want to expose him or disappear? Nina blinked. Expose him. If what you said is true, people need to know. That's the right answer, Elias said, and for the first time, she saw the ghost of a smile touch his lips, but it'll come at a price. I've already paid the worst price, she muttered. I just didn't know it until now. They emerged into a dim stairwell. He led the way down, their footsteps echoing on the metal stairs. As they descended, the building around them grew quieter, the walls colder. By the time they reached the bottom, Nina felt as though she were leaving one world and entering another. "Tell me your name," she demanded suddenly, halting him. He turned, shadows dancing across his face from the emergency light above. "Elias," he said. "Elias Cole. And how do I know I can trust you? You don't." His eyes locked onto hers. "But you left your husband for a reason he was willing to bury you for, and I have the proof to bring him down. You want justice, Nina, or do you want to keep running?" Her chest rose and fell, every breath a battle. "I want justice." Elias had arranged for a car, a black SUV parked beyond the airport's main perimeter in a snow-covered lot reserved for staff. A woman in her 50s sat behind the wheel. She had long grey-streaked hair braided down her back and eyes that said she'd seen too much. "This is Agnetha," Elias said as they climbed in. "She's with us." Agnetha gave Nina a curt nod and shifted the vehicle into gear. They pulled away, tires crunching over snow and ice. Reykjavik disappeared behind them like a memory erasing itself. For nearly 20 minutes, no one spoke. Nina stared out the window as the Icelandic landscape unfurled around them, rolling white hills, jagged lava fields blanketed in snow, and skies so pale they seemed bleached. The silence was so thick she could hear her own pulse in her ears. "This isn't just about the affair," Elias finally said, breaking the quiet. "It was never just that." "I know," Nina said. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "I found the insurance papers. He took out a life policy on me, months before the miscarriage. I recognized my signature, but it wasn't mine." "That's how this starts," Elias replied, "with lies on paper." She turned toward him, anger flickering through her grief. "You think he poisoned me? I don't think I know." He looked straight ahead, jaw tight. "The dose wasn't random. It was calibrated, enough to force a miscarriage, not enough to kill. But the goal was psychological damage, isolation, control. And when that stopped working, he moved to phase 2. Her hands clenched. "He sat by my hospital bed, held my hand, said we'd try again, because he wanted you broken and dependent." The words sank into her like daggers. She wanted to scream, she wanted to cry, but instead she just whispered, "Why me?" "Because you were smart, connected, but lonely," Elias said gently. "He selects women like that. You weren't the first." "What?" Elias hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photo. It was worn at the corners, clearly something he kept close. "This is Megan," he said, "my sister." Nina looked at the young woman in the photo, bright eyes, dark curls, dimples. She looked full of life. She died during a minor procedure. Daniel was the attending physician. They told us it was a rare reaction to anesthesia. But when I tried to get her file, it was gone. So was her death certificate. Nina's stomach dropped. "You think he killed her?" "I know he did. And I'm not the only one. A friend of mine, a journalist named Lillian, started digging. She tracked a pattern, 5 deaths, all young women, all under Daniel's care. But then she got in a car accident. Brake lines were cut. She died instantly." Nina covered her mouth. Her hands were trembling again, but now it wasn't from fear. It was fury. "They're covering it up," Elias continued. "It's not just Daniel. It's a syndicate. A private medical ring, funded by elites, sanctioned in the shadows. They test experimental treatments on undocumented patients, addicts, and vulnerable women. If someone asks too many questions, they vanish." The car began ascending a narrow mountain road. Nina glanced behind them. No headlights. "We're almost there," Agnetha said for the first time. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to a small cabin, half buried in snow. Its windows glowed amber, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside it was warm and simple. A stone fireplace, rough wooden beams, a kitchenette with cast-iron pans hanging from hooks. Elias gestured for her to sit at the table while he disappeared into a back room and returned with a sleek metal case. "This is everything I've collected," he said, unlocking it with a code. "Names, bank statements, surgery reports, falsified. Autopsies, and this," he handed her a small flash drive, "is your proof, audio. Daniel drunk, speaking freely at a medical conference. One of his colleagues was wired by the feds. You'll want to hear it." With trembling fingers, Nina slid the drive into the laptop he handed her. She put on the headphones. Daniel's voice filled her ears. "She thinks I care. But honestly, it was just easier that way. Once the kid was out of the picture, she was going to leave. But now, she's weak, easy to control, and if she goes off the rails, the policy pays out either way." She yanked the headphones off, bile rising in her throat. Elias closed the laptop gently. "We leak this, he's done. But it'll cost you. Your safety, your anonymity, your entire life. He will come after you." Nina stared into the fire for a long moment. "He already has. I'm still here." Later that night, Elias made soup, thick with vegetables, rich with heat. Nina sat at the wooden table, the warm ceramic bowl in her hands, a strange comfort. "You said Megan was your sister," she said. "Why didn't you stop after her?" "I did. For a while. I spiraled, drank too much, pushed people away. But Lillian found me. Said my sister's story could save others, so I helped her dig. And when she died, I made a promise. To take them down." He nodded. "I was engaged once," she said softly, "before Daniel. He was a teacher, sweet, but I wanted something more. Ambitious, more exciting. When I met Daniel, he dazzled me. He said I made him feel alive. I thought that was love." Elias looked at her. "It wasn't your fault." She wanted to believe that. They sat in silence for a long while, the fire crackling between them, and then 3 knocks at the door. They froze. Agnetha rose, silent as a cat, and pulled the curtain back an inch. "Police," she whispered. "Asking for Nina Fields." Nina's heart dropped into her stomach. "How?" she whispered. "They must have tracked the reroute," Elias said. He grabbed the flash drive, shoved it into a fireproof pouch, and slung it over her shoulder. "There's a back exit," Agnetha said. "It leads to the woods." "Go now," Elias urged. But as they turned toward the hall, the front door burst open. Snow swirled in. 3 officers stormed in, guns drawn. The lead officer stepped forward, eyes hard. "Nina Fields," he said. She nodded, frozen in place. "You're under arrest. Suspicion of attempted murder." Elias stepped forward. "Of who?" "Her husband," the officer said. "He's in critical condition, poisoned." Nina's knees buckled. She barely registered the cuffs as they clicked shut around her wrists. "I didn't do this," she whispered, but it didn't matter. The evidence said otherwise. The wind shrieked across the Reykjavik coastline as Nina stood behind the frosted window of the safe house, watching the grey ocean churn like her thoughts. Tomorrow was the press conference. Interpol had confirmed Daniel was in hiding and a European arrest warrant had been issued, but that didn't mean the fight was over. His attorneys were already spinning a story of mental instability, branding her as an emotional wife lashing out after a miscarriage. Her father had even released a statement supporting Daniel. None of that would matter. Not once the world heard what Daniel had planned and how far he'd gone to silence her. The flash drive Elias had smuggled through her mother was now in the hands of international prosecutors. Still, it wasn't enough for Nina. She wanted to look the world in the eye and tell the truth. The next morning, Nina stood at the makeshift podium inside Reykjavik's Ministry of Justice. A row of cameras faced her. International media outlets had picked up the story, now dubbed the Fields Conspiracy. Her legal team had warned her to stick to prepared statements, but she'd torn up the script. What she was about to say couldn't be sanitized. "My name is Nina Fields," she began, voice clear and firm. "For the last 4 years, I've been married to a man who used money, power, and manipulation to control every part of my life. I was silenced through fear, gaslit through lies. When I tried to leave, he poisoned me. When I ran, he tried to kill me and another man by setting our cabin on fire." She paused, scanning the sea of blinking red lights and frozen faces. "I stand here not just for justice, but for the truth, because there are women like me right now who are trapped behind smiles and locked doors, who think no one will believe them. To them I say, speak anyway, run anyway, survive anyway." Silence. Then applause, bursting, unstoppable. Even the translator's voice cracked as she relayed Nina's words. After the conference, Nina was escorted to a secure vehicle, breathless and lightheaded. She gripped her mother's hand. "You did it," Margaret whispered. "You shattered him." Nina gave a faint smile. "He's not done yet, and neither am I." That night, Nina received a call from a blocked number. She answered without hesitation. Elias, his voice, husky and low, spilled through. "You were brilliant. Where are you? I'm not staying in one place long. But listen, Daniel has one more move left. He's desperate, and I just found out where he's going." Nina held her breath. "He's planning to sneak into Belgium. He has a fake passport, name of Marcus Delfour. If he crosses into Brussels, he could vanish in the underground medical scene. And if he does, he's untouchable. Then we stop him." Elias hesitated. "It's not that simple. If I get caught, I'll go down too. There's still a bounty on my head. I was framed just like you." "I know," Nina whispered, "but I trust you." He was silent for a beat. "I'll send you the route. Interpol can intercept him. But Nina, if I don't make it through this, I just want to say, meeting you saved me." "No," she whispered. "You saved me." By dawn, Nina had forwarded the details to her Icelandic liaison, who immediately alerted Belgian authorities. At 4:07 p.m., 2 hours after Daniel landed in Brussels using the forged identity, officers surrounded a sleek private recovery clinic. He was inside, meeting a contact known for helping white-collar criminals vanish. When they broke in, he tried to run, but Elias was already waiting outside. He tackled Daniel to the ground as reporters and bystanders filmed the scene. "This man tried to kill his wife," Elias shouted, blood on his lip and fire in his eyes. "He burned my house to the ground. The evidence is in your inbox." The video went viral within minutes. Nina watched from Reykjavik, a hand pressed to her heart. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from fear but from release. It was over. 3 weeks later, New York City. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. On the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Daniel sat motionless, lips pressed tight, but Nina saw the flicker of disbelief behind his eyes. He had lived a life where consequences never touched him, until now. She didn't flinch when he turned to look at her as they cuffed him. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had the truth. Outside, reporters clamored, but Nina didn't stop to speak. She had one more destination. 2 months later, the vineyard Elias stood in a quiet field in the south of France, the vines golden under spring. Sunlight. He'd started work on a family friend's vineyard in exchange for peace, good food, and no questions. It was the furthest he'd ever felt from the chaos of his old life. He didn't expect the sound of tires on gravel. When he turned, his breath, he caught. Nina stepped out of a black car, wind sweeping her hair back, eyes locked on his. "I heard you make a great Chardonnay," she said softly. He stared at her, stunned. As she approached, "I wanted to thank you," she said, voice trembling. "You gave me everything, and now I want to build something real with someone who sees me." He looked away for a second. "I'm not a clean slate, Nina." "Neither am I," she said. "But maybe that's exactly what makes this possible." Slowly, he stepped forward. They met in the middle under the low branches of a fig tree, where words dissolved and healing began. Not with a kiss or a vow, but with quiet, mutual understanding. 1 year later, Reykjavik Nina walked the stage at a women's rights summit, now the founder of a non-profit called Speak Anyway. Survivors from around the world had come to see her, to share their stories, to reclaim power. Her mother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. And in the shadows backstage, Elias watched quietly, hands in his pockets, heart full. As Nina stepped up to the microphone, the lights caught her smile. "I used to believe survival was the end of the story," she said, "but it turns out it's just the beginning, the end.